Welcome to Soul Elevation, guiding your ascension to new heights. I'm your host, Kara Goodwin. I'm really excited to be with you here today on Monday, August 25th, as I'm recording this. I want to talk about the fact that science has proven, I think this has been around for a while now, that our every cell within our body has regenerated every 7 years. So when we think about that down at the cellular level, every 7 years, we are a completely different person because every single cell that comprises our bodies is new. So there's this 7-year cycle that is known in a lot of traditions beyond just the science part. I remember even somebody who I knew a long time ago, like before I started meditating, before what I consider my spiritual awakening, and she had her child in a Waldorf school, I want to say it was. And I think she was the first person who actually told me that about how the body completely changes every 7 years in terms of from the cellular perspective. And that was part of their foundation of their teaching, if I remember correctly. It's been a long time since I had that discussion. But if you think about that, if we really dive into that from the physical perspective, that's profound because of course, not all of that is happening all at once. Every day, cells are sloughing off and they're being carried away and they're being replaced by new cells. And so it's a gradual process. And what it makes me think of, and this is again something that I've borrowed, I think I heard this first from Paramahansa Yogananda or one of his disciples. Um, but whoever it was, enjoyed restoring boats. And so they would take vintage boats and or maybe they just gave this as an example. Maybe they didn't enjoy restoring them. They just gave it as an example. I can't remember. It's been too long, but doesn't matter. Um, so let's say you have a boat, you have an old boat. And when you get the boat, the first thing that needs to be fixed and changed out is the motor. So you immediately put a new motor in, but the rest of the boat remains. And so you can't say you have a new boat because it's just a new motor. But then the next year, you decide you're going to replace the floorboards. You know, all the boards are warped. I don't know what you call them even on a boat, but let's say you have a wooden boat and you replace all the wood on the boat. And so now you have a boat that has the same wood, you know, the same type of wood, but it's new wood and you have a new motor. And the following year, you replace the seats in the boat. And so there are new seats. And then the following year, you replace some of the control panel equipment. And every year, you're taking out something old and you're replacing it with something new. And before you know it, years have passed, and every single part of that boat has been changed out. And that's really interesting. Like, do you still have the same boat? But it's happened over time. So, it still seems like it's the same boat because you didn't go and buy a new boat and you didn't build a boat, but every single part has been replaced with a new part. And that is what happens with your body. So it's not like you go and, you know, you step into some sort of chamber and you come out with all new parts, all new cells, but that is happening slowly over time. And it's the spirit that remains the same. So, what I love about bringing our awareness to this natural process is that we live, at least in Western society, we live in a society that really values the physical to the extent that we're not really encouraged to to consider the soul, to consider this spirit aspect in our culture. In my culture, that is not something that we factor in. In our science, it's not something that's factored in. It used to be when Einstein was doing his equations, what I understand is that there was a factor for the ether. And then that over time was removed from what I understand. Now, quantum physics is kind of adding that back in. They call it, I think, the vacuum factor, something like that. But we discount the spiritual aspect, the soul aspect of this physical reality. But when we think about the fact that every 7 years we have this cellular regeneration, so every single cell within our body has been replaced over a 7 year um, time span, we are ever new. And that really makes me step back and think about from my own perspective. My spiritual awakening happened, let's see. Well, I consider the beginning of my spiritual awakening when my life just went upside down, and I there was a lot of death. There were a lot of really severe accidents, really severe surgeries happening with people very close in my family. Not my immediate family at that time, but like my immediate family I grew up in, and my husband's immediate family that he grew up in. Um, and that happened in 2016. And now, when I'm recording this, that's 2025, which is 9 years, right? And so that's beyond the 7 year cycle. And I know that I have changed a lot in those 9 years. Again, that was what spurred my spiritual awakening. That was what tipped it off. I felt like the rug got pulled out from under me, and I didn't have my footing. And that's where I found meditation, and that's where everything kind of went from there. But to think about it from that physical perspective of, at this point, it's been 9 years, and from a physical perspective, every single cell within my being has is a different cell than the ones that were going through that process. And I still hold the memories. I still have memories from my childhood, of course, just like you do. But it's really poignant to think about the physicalness that we are, this physical vehicle, and yet it's like this new being. So, what is it that is holding those memories? What is it that is, and we might think, well, it's the mind, but the mind is still, we still associate the mind with the brain in regular mainstream thinking. Well, the brain has cells. So the cells within the brain are also regenerating. They're all different. I have all different cells within my brain than I did when I was going through that. So I was saying that mainstream acceptance is that the mind and the brain are equal. I remember the first time that I heard about the brain being a filter rather than like the creator of thoughts. And that was something that really made me stop in my tracks. It was Dr. Larry Dossey, one of his books. I think it was a book about the power of prayer, which is a fascinating read. I'll try to remember to put that link in the show notes because I was really deeply moved by that book. But he talked about the the idea, and I think he mentioned some scientific research about the brain being a receiver. So rather than the brain generating thoughts, the brain is receiving thoughts. And then the brain is working at a frequency level, just like a radio receiver. So when you have your radio dialed in to a certain frequency, that's the music that you're going to hear. That's the radio station that you're going to be able to hear. So Dr. Larry Dossey was talking about the brain as a receiver, just like a radio. Whatever frequency the brain is attuned to, those are the thoughts that it's going to tune into. So rather than the brain, it is really easy for us to think about, oh, the brain, I'm thinking this, I'm creating these thoughts. I was thinking the other day about this. It's like, is it, or could it also be that we are tuning in to thoughts, and that goes into that collective field, that we have this collective consciousness, and it is full of thoughts from other people, thoughts that are being fed to us by disincarnate entities, thoughts that are being projected. um, and then if you ever hear about, like, you know the one of the things with what is it, 5G or whatever, I think one of the controversies with that is that it's emitting this frequency that's harmful. It's harmful to our bodies, it's harmful to our cells, but maybe there is also some sort of like broadcasting frequency that is contributing to our mental health, that is contributing to the thoughts that are more easily picked up, or it's attuning our brains for us, and not um, making it harder for us to have a higher frequency. I'm not, that is speculation on my part, but when you do think about broadcasting and frequency, and then the brain as a frequency receiver, that's where we want to get more autonomous with our ability to tune in to our frequency. And we can do that through meditation, things like breath work. All of those help us to be more empowered, to be able to recognize when we're on a lower frequency, and to be able to have the tools to recognize that and then do something about it, to have a higher frequency, to attune ourselves to a higher frequency. So even though it may seem like the outside world is doing what it can to keep us at a lower frequency, we ultimately have the tools to be able to offset that. So so the brain as a receiver, then, even though it's got all of these new cells that have regenerated over time, over the last 7 years, there is still that animating force within the body, within this body vehicle, the animating force, the animating factor, which is the soul, which is the spirit, which is how we have access to these memories that are longer than the 7-year cycle of when we've had this cellular regeneration. So to me, that's a really profound way to think about how we really primarily are soul. We really primarily are spirit. We aren't these physical beings. We have these physical bodies. I always love that expression, that you are not a body that has a soul. You are a soul that has a body. And that, I feel that the proof of that, if we want to think about it in terms of proof, is the cellular regeneration that happens every 7 years. So think about that. Let that permeate through your being as you start the week. And I hope that you're able to really feel into the truth of your soul. And I thank you for being here today, for watching this recording, if that's the case. I wish you many, many blessings. Thanks so much.